Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Self-publishing Roundtable. I'm your host, Adam, and I'm joined by my co-hosts tonight, Trish McCowan, and Lindsay Broker is here again this time also. She's still on her vacation, but she found an internet connection, so we have her back. And we're also joined by our special guest author tonight for an interview, Libbie Hawker. Libbie, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Libbie. I guess not much else to say, is there? I'm a self-published author, and I mainly do historical fiction, which I guess is what we're primarily going to be talking about tonight.
All right, yeah, and we'll get started kind of where you got started. So just starting off, how did you get into the whole writing thing in general? So not necessarily publishing, but just writing in general, writing novels.
Well, I've always really liked writing, like many people who are now writers. It's kind of always been my big goal for my life, and ever since I was 8, I've wanted to be a writer, you know. I got really serious about starting to write when I was 28, so back in 2008. And I, as quickly as I could, wrote my first novel, and then ended up working with 2 different literary agents at that time, trying to get it sold to a traditional publisher. And that was pretty much the long and short of it. I mean, I've always really liked history a lot, so it was kind of natural for me to slide into historical fiction with my first novel.
All right, perfect. And so your very first novel, was that one that's released now, or did you write that one and kind of stick it in a drawer, or how did that?
No, my first novel is the first one I ended up publishing. It was the one that I got my first agent with, and the first one to go out on submission to publishers, and the first one to be rejected by everybody. And then I took it and self-published it eventually after I just didn't have any more options really we'd kind of gone through as many good publishers as we could find, excuse me, between my 2 agents and me. And that was pretty much it. I just self-published it because I figured there wasn't anything else to do with it, and moved on and started writing some other books, and it kind of took off from there. So yeah, it was my first book. It's called The Sekhmet Bed, for those who don't know.
All right, and so what was the year that you ended up publishing that one, and how long until you decided, to no longer wait for publishers?
Let me see. I started working with the agents at the end of 2009. It took me most of that year to find an agent, and then we kind of went through the submissions process throughout 2010, and I think it was 2011 when I finally decided just to self-publish it. I kind of looked around at some small presses. At the time, I didn't find any small presses that I felt were doing a really great job with historical fiction, and so I just kind of went, well, might as well self-publish it and just see what happens. Yeah, so I guess it was late 2011, it was like September of that year. So, excuse me, sorry. It's continued to sell pretty well for the intervening 3 years ever since then, which has been nice to see.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm guessing you're happy that you decided to self-publish it, of course. So, but kind of going back a little bit, I know you said you're really interested in historical fiction already. Is there any thing that kind of prompted you to write in that first, or any reason that you chose that genre, or?
I think I've always really liked history. It's just exciting to me. It was, one of my favorite subjects during school, and then when I got out of school, I would just constantly listen to history podcasts and read, nonfiction history books, and just kind of get my hands on whatever I can find involving history. So it was just kind of a natural outgrowth of my other interests outside of writing. I mean, I probably, I guess we tend to write, especially for our first books, what we like to read the most, and I have always been a big reader of historical fiction, so it was just kind of my natural jump to make from, well, I've decided I'm going to start writing seriously now, and then it just wasn't even a question for me. Of course I was going to write historical fiction.
And are you writing full-time now, or?
Yes, I'm writing full-time now. I quit my day job on May 31st of this year. And yeah, so I've been writing full-time for about 4 months now, 4 or 5 months. I don't know. I'm bad at math. Since June. Yeah, and it's been great. It's been really exciting to see that self-publishing can get you to that point where you can actually rely on your books for your steady source of income. It's really nice to see.
Awesome, congratulations. And I thought you had actually been doing it full-time a lot longer, so.
No, surprise.
And so, if you don't mind, what were you doing before that? Was it book-related? I mean, is that what you had, majored in? I know you said you went to school for some stuff, so.
Oh, when I said school, I meant high school. I actually didn't go to college. The eternal shame of my family still. But no, God, what was I doing before? I've had so many day jobs, it's kind of crazy to count them all up, and they've been very diverse. So immediately before quitting my day job, I was working for a pet health insurance company, a veterinary insurance company, and I was putting together like medical dossiers on each of the pets who were enrolled. So it was kind of my specific job, was combing through medical records and then putting together kind of a profile of which dogs had which pre-existing conditions and all that fun stuff. Before, in the past, I did emergency admitting at a vet hospital, which was exciting. That was like an overnight shift, the graveyard shift, never a dull moment. I've also worked as a zookeeper in the past. I've handled show dogs for a living. I worked for my sister's yarn dyeing business for quite a while, dyeing yarn for her. So I've done everything you can imagine. But all I ever wanted to do was just to write. So it's nice to finally be there.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it there as well. And like I said, it seems like a really good choice. We'll talk more about how your books are doing in a little while. Before we got on the show, though, you were mentioning that you were, and I found one of your nonfiction books that you had just released, I believe, and I think you said you're spreading out with a pen name or two. So, without getting too deep into it right now, do you want to talk a little bit about the other genres you're trying and what's made you go that route?
Sure, absolutely. Part of what's made me try to branch into other genres is just to kind of diversify a little bit. I think it's smart to get your fingers into as many different pies as you can when it comes to self-publishing. You never really know how the market's going to shift and change. So if you kind of have a little bit of something established here and there, you're more likely to be able to adapt to those rapid changes that come around. So I have started dabbling in romance a little bit, which has been surprisingly fun. I've really enjoyed writing it. I did put out a nonfiction book that's called Gotta Read It, and it's basically the same advice I've been handing out on forums for years and years about how to write good blurbs or pitches or product descriptions or query letters or whatever you're trying to sell your book with. I basically just got so weary of typing the same advice over and over that I threw it all into a $1 ebook and put it on the internet. But apparently people have found it pretty useful. So yeah, I've been doing my historical and literary fiction on one hand, and then a little bit of romance on the other hand, and then some nonfiction writing. I'm actually going to be launching another romance pen name focusing on sweet romances, so nothing sexy, in the near future. So I've been busy, but just trying to stay as diverse and as widespread as I can to kind of catch whatever changes come down the pipeline.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you're branching out a lot. So that kind of segues nicely into the next part, and I'll hand it over to Lindsay for that and talk more about the process of juggling all those different things. So Lindsay, did you want to go ahead?
Sure thing. Wow, sweet romance too. I've got one of those. So let me know when you're ready, and we'll do a box set or something.
Oh, totally. That'd be great. I'd love to.
All right. So a lot of the listeners are kind of new to writing or just working on their first novels, and so they're often interested in how do you complete your novels? Are you a plotter or a pantser? So kind of a couple questions along that way. It sounds like you've really published a lot in the last not even 5 years, 2011 you said, since you decided to self-publish?
Yeah. With my little tiny ebook on writing blurbs out there, that's my 10th. Well, that was my 9th book out, and then just a couple days ago I released 3 parts in a serial romance, so I guess I'm up to 12 now. Oh, that's not counting some short stories. I've got some short stories too, but they never sell. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. I saw Schrodinger's cat there. I don't know why that wouldn't be a hot seller. That sounds like that's what the...
Schrodinger's kitty. It's a little racy. You gotta beware if you're gonna read that one.
All right. Well, so are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am definitely a plotter, and I believe in it very strongly for a very good reason. I used to try to pants. It never worked for me. I mean, it kind of worked. So I have a novel called Baptism for the Dead, which took me 2 years to write because I didn't plot it. I pantsed it. And it's a good book, but if I could only turn out one book every 2 years, I would be hurting. So by plotting, it allows me to actually focus on the parts of the story that I know are going to be compelling and are going to be relevant to the reader, and to turn out a functional story that I know is going to work and get me from the beginning to the end on the first round of writing, basically, without having to mess around with other stuff. So I'm a big believer in plotting, and if people do want to learn how to plot well, I actually have a book I can recommend called The Anatomy of Story, and it's written by John Truby, and it's Truby. It's a really, really good book that will teach you, if you want to learn how to plot, and I recommend it, it'll teach you how to do it in a really effective way that focuses on like a character arc instead of on any other stuff like acts or on plot arcs or anything. It keeps your focus really firmly on a character kind of going through this progression of change, which I find personally is the most satisfying type of story to read, so that's what I try to write, and that book definitely shows you how to do it, so highly recommended.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that one out, because I've become a pantser to a plotter kind of just to increase the word count and become more efficient, but I tend to, my plotting is work.
It can be really hard to do until you sort of understand why you should follow a particular progression on it, and that book really makes it click in your head like, oh my gosh, it all kind of comes dawning at you like this lamp next to me making my head glow. Sorry for the eerie glow on my face, by the way, everyone. But yeah, it really will make it clear to you the right way to put an effective, efficient, workable plot together from step one. So it really saves a lot of time. It's nice.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm really interested in what you said about, he talks about the character arc, focusing on that instead of the plot, so sounds interesting. Can you say, like, how many words do you shoot for? Do you have a daily goal, or do you just sit down and write? Right now that I'm finally get to do this full time, I pretty much schedule my writing day around my husband's work schedule. So he goes to work. As soon as he leaves, I'm up and writing. I write until he comes home, and I try to just get whatever done during that time that I can. Typically for me, in about a 7-hour work day, taking an hour for lunch, I can usually get around 5,000 to 6,000 words done. Typically, sometimes I'll have slowdowns for doing research and stuff, which of course is essential for historical fiction. Sometimes it'll go even faster. Like I wrote my book on blurb writing, since I already knew exactly what I was going to say. I did like that 12,000 words in a day, so I can crank it out really fast if I know precisely what's going to happen. But even with a plot, and an outline, sometimes you don't really know, and it takes a little bit longer. But I would say on average, like usually 5,000 words a day. Yeah, that sounds great. With the historical fiction, I've noticed that most of your books are pretty thick, and I remember I read a lot of historical fiction as a kid, kind of the K-Bear books, and yeah. They had romance and mammoths and all that good stuff in there.
They had everything.
Very educational in many ways. But how do you balance kind of putting in historical detail and the facts that maybe people want to read when they pick up that genre with keeping it interesting and keeping the story going?
That's a great question. I don't get asked that a lot, which is startling. Detail in historical fiction is colossally important to readers. I mean, I think it's really important to know exactly what your reader base expects, and historical fiction readers do want to have that kind of feeling of being, experiencing a different time, a different era, a different culture. But yeah, you can really easily go overboard and just like make it an endless litany of, here's what their clothing looked like, and here's what they ate and how they cooked it, and yeah, that gets really dull. But I've found by using John Truby's method of setting up a character arc-based plot from the beginning, I'm able to focus any of those details and kind of historical tidbits that the readers want, as long as I focus them on the character's progression and on what's going on in terms of the character kind of making their big change over the course of the book, then I'm able to keep it feeling tight-paced and keep the plot feeling like it's moving, and then it doesn't feel draggy, but you're still getting all the historical fiction stuff you want. So, yeah. John Truby, man, he's my hero.
All right, I will definitely look him up. Do you usually pick kind of famous historical figures, or do you like to work with the smaller people might not know about so much?
I have picked all famous people so far. I know a lot of historical fiction authors will just kind of invent a character and sort of write about a particular event or a time frame from this fictional character's point of view, but for whatever reason I just get really drawn to actual people from history, and I really have a good time kind of trying to figure out why they did what they did and what might have motivated them and how their story might have played out and kind of fictionalizing it. So far, everything I have written in historical fiction and everything I'm planning to write for the next several months all involves famous people. I'm sure at some point I'll just make somebody up, but it hasn't happened yet.
Do you find that it's kind of hard to find the details when you're going all the way back to Egyptian history as far as what they were like and that sort of thing?
It can be, and there's a lot that you really just have to infer, and there's also a lot you have to kind of take with a grain of salt. I mean, when you're talking about cultures as old as ancient Egypt, and in particular the era that I wrote in for my 4 Egyptian books was like 3,500 years ago, so it's a long time ago. You kind of have to take what historians say they know with a little bit of a grain of salt on that. They don't necessarily know everything about it. We have a lot of assumptions we're making based on our modern or contemporary thoughts about things that aren't necessarily in line with what the people may have thought and believed back then. So there is room to kind of invent some stuff with history that far back, but I do really do my best to stick to what's accepted as known fact about these cultures too. I mean, I try to give as historically accurate an experience as I can, as far as you can say that something's historically accurate that occurred 3,500 years ago, because obviously we can't really know about it. When I wrote about Pocahontas, which is much closer to us in history, I did a lot more research on that, and for a longer period of time than I did with my Egyptian books. The interesting thing about Egyptology is that we kind of apply most of our knowledge about the entire, 5,000-year history of ancient Egypt across the board. So you can say, okay, there were these gods, and they wore this stuff, and they, had this mode of transportation and these kinds of weapons, and that varies some within that range of their history. But for the most part, it's kind of accepted as like, oh yeah, ancient Egypt, painting coal around your eyes and riding around in a chariot, and as long as you get that stuff right, the readers are happy. But with something that's so much closer in history like Pocahontas, I had to really do a lot more in-depth research and a lot more fact-checking, and it was actually, strangely, much harder to find accurate, trustworthy resources on Pocahontas than it was on ancient Egypt, I guess, just because Egypt is such a more intriguing setting that so many more people have written about it, and there was just more to choose from in terms of nonfiction, whereas there are like 3 or 4 biographies of Pocahontas, period, and that was it. So it was tougher to glean that information, and it took me longer to kind of assemble all the facts I needed to do a good historical novel for that one.
It sounds like a daunting task, and you can't just make stuff up like you can in fantasy. But,
yeah. Oh, and if you make up stuff, the readers will skewer you. They are on it. they watch for that stuff. So yeah, you have to be careful.
Yeah. So let's jump into your editing process a little bit. Do you actually have any? Do you do beta readers? And do you have any fact checker kind of people that will kind of watch for the history errors or potential errors?
I haven't used. I can see how those would be really useful in writing into like a new area, whether you're doing a new era in historical fiction or whether you're doing like a totally new genre that you haven't tapped into yet. I haven't used them yet so far just because I couldn't find anybody who had read as much stuff about ancient Egypt as I had, so I wasn't sure that I would be getting accurate fact-checking from those people, or whether it would just be like, well, Cleopatra did this, but Cleopatra was 1,500 years later, so that was a big difference in time. And I really couldn't find anybody who was willing to beta read a book about Pocahontas that didn't involve a love story and that was 160,000 words long. So with my Egyptian stuff, I've traded edits with friends in the past. I didn't ask them to fact check, I just had them do like typo hunting and developmental stuff on character work. For the Pocahontas book, I hired an editor because it was just too overwhelming to expect anybody to comb through 500 pages of book and give me their opinion on it. It's a big book, so I did work with a professional editor on that one, which was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
So did you have her not just proofread then, kind of do copy editing or?
Yeah, I had her. She was kind of doing a little bit of everything. So obviously checking for typos and proofreading and stuff, but then also doing a lot of like style cleanup for me. I can get like as fast as I write, I can be sort of hasty with my construction sometimes, and that comes out very awkward occasionally. So she was kind of my style police on that. And then she also did a lot of developmental stuff too, catching issues where things were contradictory with stuff I'd said prior in the book, or asking pointed questions about why characters were doing X, Y, and Z when it seemed a little weird for their personalities. So she did a really great job with highlighting stuff I needed to fix, and I've carried that over into writing my next historical fiction too. So I'm definitely much more aware of my pitfalls as a writer now, and I'm going to work with her again on future books too. So that's great.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really helpful to get those outside eyes from a professional. We have a couple of kind of related questions here from the audience.
Okay.
How long does it take you to get to the point where the manuscript is ready enough to send for editing?
I'm a little, I guess, unique among many writers on this count, where I write the book from start to finish. I read over it once and fix anything that jumps out at me, and then I send it off to editing. So I don't do a lot of additional drafting or a lot of like protracted revisions. It's one pass through for me to make sure nothing looks really absurd, and then my editor goes through it twice. So she'll read through it once, make comments, sends it back to me. I fix everything. She reads through it one more time and sends me her kind of final comments and any other errors that she caught. So I guess in terms of how long it takes, however long it takes me to write the book, which is about a month for most books at this point. So. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty good for 160,000 words there.
Oh, I didn't write that in a month. Yeah, that was crazy. No, I did. Let's see. I started working on Tidewater in March, like mid-March, and then I quit my day job at the end of May. So that was like 10 weeks of writing while I still had a full-time job, and then I finished like the last 80,000 words of that book in June. So it takes me about a month to do 80,000 words, roughly.
It's really good. Yeah, if you're going to be a professional writer these days, it definitely helps to be able to write quickly and get books out regularly.
Yeah, you got to crank them out.
One other question somebody was wondering, do you do first person or third person, multiple point of view characters for your historical fiction?
Oh, that's a good question. So far it's all been third person, and I'll do however many points of view are relevant to the story, I guess you could say. So the first book, The Sekhmet Bed, really only has one point of view character, and then as you kind of go through this 4-book series and it kind of expands into this big political mess, you have more point of view characters that are brought in as the story just kind of gets bigger than any of them can control on their own. And in Pocahontas, or in Tidewater, I had 3 third-person point of view characters, which is Pocahontas, John Smith, and then a guy named Opechancanough, who is Pocahontas' uncle. So that was that so far. And then I'm working on one right now about Zenobia, who was a famous empress who took over part of Rome without Rome's permission. And that's actually in present tense, so a little bit of torture for people who don't like that. But that's what that story wanted, so I'm going with it.
Yeah, 2,000-year-old present tense. That's the natural.
Exactly. Good times.
And we have a couple questions about your romance series, if you're up for talking about, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Are they historical romances or contemporary?
They're not. They're paranormal, because I figured, I needed to write some stuff that I could just crank out fast and get it selling as quickly as I could. So yeah, I shied away from historical on that. I do want to write historical romance, but right now I need to write stuff that I don't have to research. So I have one little series of novellas that's about ghost hunters, which is pretty fun. And I have one I just started, which is a serial novel about, it's in the ever popular and fantastically, I don't even understand how this trope got started, but I love it, the big, beautiful woman and werewolf trope, which I was like, hey, I'm just going to take this totally absurd trope and run with it, and to my surprise, it was one of the most enjoyable books I've ever written. Really, really fun. So I just rolled with it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's definitely good to have something that you can kind of just whip out, whether it's novellas or serials or just romance, whatever's fun, in between your 500-page epic historical novels. For the serial romance, how did that sell? Did you try publishing them any certain way, a certain length of time apart, or bundling them up at the end, that kind of thing?
It was very, very new. I literally just put out the first 3 little episodes or parts of it 2 days ago, so it's just started, and I'm going to have 3 more episodes that come out. So my plan is, once it has all the parts completed, which should be about 3 or 4 weeks here, I'm going to bundle it up and try to sell it as kind of a complete set, which will be about 110,000 words total. But so far, I mean, another big reason why I decided to do a little serial like this with short installments is so I could put a bunch of 99-cent books up into Kindle Unlimited and hopefully cash in on the $1.50 borrow rates. They're not doing so hot for novel length stuff, but I was like, I can stick up a bunch of 99-cent books and make, you know, way more money on those than I would make with a normal sale. So I crammed those up onto KU as quickly as I could, and so far so good. I mean, I just got this book out, but I'm already seeing a big, nice stir in the borrows, and that has been increasing dramatically since then. So we'll see if it maintains over time.
Oh, that's great. I know they had the big KU episode last week, but yeah, I'm doing that with my pen name too. I finally have a book in there, and I've noticed that the sales ranking is a lot higher than it really should be based on the sales. So now I'm kind of bitter about all my other stuff. But
I know, it's a little frustrating. It is. I think a lot of it has to do with what they call ghost borrows. So like they have borrowed the books, but somehow it's just not tabulating at the same speed as sales. I don't know. It's all confusing. It's really it's thrown everyone's perception of data about self-publishing for a loop.
Yeah, I think my theory is that every borrow counts towards your sales ranking, whether they ever get to that 10% or not. So, but anyway.
Yeah, I believe that's probably true.
Let me give one more question here, and then I'm going to hand you off to Trish for marketing stuff, I believe. But somebody asked, how different is it from moving from fiction to nonfiction for the first time? Or was this your first foray into nonfiction? Any thoughts on the difference in the two, writing the two?
Yeah, this was the first time I've written a nonfiction work, but I liked it. I mean, like I said, it came out real fast. I was able to write that little short ebook in just one day and get it up there and get it selling. I liked it enough that I'm planning on writing some more nonfiction titles too, and one of them specifically is going to be about how to kind of break into historical fiction as an indie author. So I enjoyed it. It was different in the respect that, I mean, yeah, you're writing with a totally different style. If you're trying to be instructive and informative, it's very different from if you're trying to be entertaining or thought-provoking or, you know, any of that stuff. So much more straightforward and dry style that just kind of gets to the point and is like, here's what you need to do, and that's it. But I liked it a lot. I mean, I'll definitely write more nonfiction. It was fun.
And did you say you had a different pen name for the nonfiction also?
No, the nonfiction is just under Libbie Hawker. So it's Libbie Hawker for historical fiction and literary fiction, and Lib Starling with the paranormal romance stuff.
All right, great. I think the blurb writing book would be helpful for a lot of people in the audience, and I wouldn't mind checking it out too. So.
Yeah, check it out. It's called Gotta Read It.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and hand you off to Trish now to ask questions about publishing and marketing.
Okay, awesome.
Hi, Libbie. I wanted to first say that your choice for sweet romance, I think, is a very smart one. I was down at the Indie Recon in Utah last weekend, or not last weekend, the weekend before that, and every single person that came into that auditorium down there, of course it's Salt Lake City, but every single one of them was looking for sweet romance. Every single one of them. I think it's an undersupplied genre, and I think sales there are going to be very, very well.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's that's one of the reasons why I wanted to branch into that as well. And I'm sure being in Salt Lake skewed it a little bit because it's such a conservative population there. I used to live in Salt Lake, so I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I've noticed that it is a little underserved, and it seems to have a very voracious audience that's just trying to like grab more of it. So I was like, okay, I'll give you some more. Just keep pushing it at you. Good times.
Yeah, there's so many people concentrating on the hot romances that they're really kind of desperate to find their sweet romances. So I think that's a really good choice for getting into romance. Paranormal, it seems to kind of be waning a little bit, but you never know. There's always a market. There's always an audience for those books.
Yeah.
So I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about how you got traction as a historical fiction author. With the first book that you published, what did you do to try to kind of get your name out there so that people were aware the book was available and where to look for it?
Yeah, I always get asked this question in interviews, and it's so awkward because I really didn't do anything, which is awful and probably wouldn't fly now. But back in 2011, there weren't any other Egyptian historical novels out there, especially not available on Kindle. There were like 2 or 3 other titles, so everybody who was already looking for Egyptian stuff had already read them. Most of the Egyptian historical fiction is still print only. It's like older stuff that you just can't get as an ebook. So that was a big benefit, the fact that I just happened to come along at the right time with an ebook in a setting that people really wanted to read and were actively searching for. Since then, we've seen a lot more Egyptian historical fiction come out, and I have had to definitely step up my promotion of that series to kind of keep it visible. But I've found ads to be the most effective for that, and particularly BookBub, but some others as well. But yeah, I mean, one of the big things that really allowed me to gain a foothold so quickly in historical fiction, and if somebody out there is listening to this wondering how to get into historical fiction as an indie author, the best recommendation I can do would be to really take the time to study the market very, very carefully and identify where the gaps in the market are. Like you were saying about sweet romance, there's a big audience there that's wanting that, but they're not finding it. One of the things that makes historical fiction such an interesting sort of playing field right now for indie authors is that there just aren't very many indie authors writing it. So most of the books that are available are coming from traditional publishers. They're higher priced, and they're still very, very fad focused. So several years ago, any historical fiction fan like myself would have known that you just pretty much rode the wave of whatever fad was coming out of New York in regards to what was available in your favorite genre. So like we had this huge Tudor wave that was like seemingly unending, and finally it's slowing down a little bit, and we're seeing some other settings and characters. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to read historical fiction for the longest time, it was Tudors or nothing, and that mindset is still there to a large degree in historical fiction. So there is this really great opportunity for an indie, especially one who can write relatively fast, to look at what niches are being underserved in that market and write specifically to those niches. Like I know there's an author out there named Zoe Sadia who specifically does novels about Mesoamerica. So she has like ancient, Mayans and Aztecs and all these other cultures. No one else is doing this. No one. And she's making pretty decent sales on it. I watch her books all the time, and they're always like jumping up the charts and getting all kinds of new readers just because she's the only person doing that setting right now. So it is a really, really good way to kind of give yourself some free visibility just by taking the time to watch that market for a while and take note of what's not there.
Okay, and then how would you recommend that people find those niches? I mean, what are you looking at where you find these underserved niches that readers are screaming for?
I think the smartest thing you can do is to get onto Goodreads and go join a group on Goodreads called Historical Fictionistas. It's a big discussion group. It's, as far as I can tell, the largest and most active community of really hardcore historical fiction fans on the internet. So it's a really great place to just sort of observe and hang out and just watch what they talk about. All kinds of discussions will happen there, but regularly, at least once a month, somebody comes up with a thread that's like, what I'd really like to see? Ancient Egypt, or whatever. And a bunch of people will chime in and be like, yeah, that'd be cool. And that's, everyone complains about how they can't find enough books on that topic. So that's the type of thing that you want to watch for. And in fact, that's why I decided the time was right to do Tidewater, which is about Pocahontas, because people were starting to talk about how there were so few new releases dealing with Native American history. So I was like, well, I've got this outline all set to go, so I'll start working on that. And 4 months later, I had a book all set. So that is a really smart move, is to keep an eye on historical fictionistas. And there, a lot of authors are afraid of Goodreads. They think it's like a terrifying, scary place. It's not that bad, and that group in particular is really nice and very welcoming to authors, as long as you don't try to push your books on them. Just show up and talk about historical fiction like everyone else is doing, and you'll have a great time there and make lots of friends and learn a whole lot about the market too.
Okay, obviously you do a lot of research. Did you do this kind of research into the marketplace for your covers? For example, when I first self-published, I went to the bestsellers list in my genre and looked at what every single cover, that was selling really well, and then I patterned my book after that. Did you do the same thing for your covers? How did you end up doing your covers?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because obviously covers are ridiculously important to a book's success, like crazy important. I think it's, aside from writing a halfway decent book, it's the thing you have to get right in order to be successful. And one of the reasons why I decided to self-publish when I did is like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, had been going through all these traditional publishers and got rejected by everybody. And then when I started looking at small presses to shop the segment bed to, they all had terrible covers. And I was like, I just can't do that to my book. I can't put an awful cover on it. So these covers I'm seeing from these presses don't even look like historical fiction. So then that was what finally led me in the end to self-publish. I was like, I can make a better cover for this book by myself. So yeah, that's exactly what I did. I looked at what was selling well currently in historical fiction. I looked at how I knew I was going to expand this first Egyptian book into a series, so I thought of ways that I could brand that clearly as a series. And then for people who are familiar with the books, they have this papyrus texture behind it, and then a big image right in the middle of people who are ostensibly in the book. So that's kind of how I branded it, with that yellowy papyrus sort of look. Yeah, I absolutely, I'm constantly looking at covers in the genre and constantly working with my guy who does the excuse me, who does the illustrations for, he did Tidewater and he's doing my future books as well. I'm always kind of sending him notes on what I think is a hot selling book right now, and what elements of this cover are working, and why I think that's working so well to target the audience. So yeah, together he and I have come up with some pretty cool images for some upcoming books, and they're all based 100% off of what is currently selling really well in the market.
Did you do the same thing with your pricing strategies then? Did you look at what the books were selling for in your genres and then price accordingly, or do you have any kind of a pricing strategy? I noticed that your Egyptian books are $4.99, but your Pocahontas one is $6.99. Was there a reason behind the price difference there?
Yes, there are. My pricing strategy has been interesting. Hang on, I'm going to mute for just a second so I can clear my throat. Allergies. Okay. Yeah, the one thing I did do marketing-wise when I first self-published this book was that I launched it at $5.99, which was kind of a bold choice for somebody, especially back in 2011 when everybody was doing $2.99. But I specifically, I thought if I'm going to self-publish this anyway and not expecting, much to happen with it, I at least want to get some good reviews on it and make sure that it ends up in the hands of people who are really going to enjoy this book. So I priced it a little bit out of the range, just a touch, to make sure the people who initially read it were really going to read that book because they wanted it and not because it was cheap. And it did pay off with a lot of good reviews early on. Then I dropped the prices down to kind of market levels as the book started to pick up steam. Now, with Tidewater, it is priced a little bit higher than most other, definitely than other indie books in historical fiction. $4.99 is a pretty average price for novel-length books in that genre. But $6.99 is a little bit outside of it, and that's specifically because I am going to be attempting, hopefully, fingers crossed, to get a BookBub ad with that. I'm going to drop it down to 99 cents pretty soon. And it doesn't have that many reviews yet. It's got like 45. So when you are hurting a little bit on reviews, I have heard from sources who would know that the more dramatic shift in price you have, the more likely BookBub is to pick up your book. So I'm going to try, if I can, to get Tidewater all the way up to the top 100 on a 99-cent sale. And part of that strategy is to price it a little higher now so that when I drop the price down, BookBub will think it's extra tasty. I don't know if it'll work. We'll see. Yeah.
That's a smart approach, though. That's a really smart approach. Do you worry
Thanks. We'll see if it works.
Do you worry about there being any flashback from your fans that might have bought it at $6.99 and then you dropped the price to 99 cents? Have you had any fans come back on you for that?
I haven't. My fans are really super awesome. I totally love them. They all, for the most part, seem to be really understanding of the fact that I'm in this to run a business, that I'm not trying to screw anybody over, but I got to get paid too. So that's nice. So far, I've run a lot of sales with the SecNet. I've bounced it around from $4.99 to 99 cents to perma-free for a while and back up to $4.99 and all price points in between. And nobody's complained about it so far, and I haven't seen my returns go up significantly during those time periods either. So I don't think there will be blowback, but if someone ever, I've had people complain about, things they perceive to be formatting errors, which were their Kindle malfunctioning and stuff. So whenever someone complains, I send them a free book. So if somebody complained to me about Tidewater being $6.99, I would tell them, return the copy you bought to Amazon. I'm sending you a free copy right now. So it's not a big deal to me. It's an ebook. I'm going to give them out like candy if I can, anyway. So if someone has a complaint, I think the best thing you can do is to make it better by being like, you're right, I was a jerk to you. Here's a freebie, just to smooth things over a little bit.
Okay, so now you said you did a lot of bouncing around in your price points. Have you found a price point that just seems to be the sweet spot for you? I noticed you got your books at $4.99. Is that where you found you sell the most copies, basically, and get kind of the best ROA on your investment?
Yes, definitely. $4.99 for roughly 80 to 90,000 word historical fiction has been great for me. Tidewater's actually selling pretty well at $6.99, but I think it's because people realize it's a huge book, so they're a little more willing to pay more for it. It kind of, it has a week where it doesn't sell much at all, and then it'll have a big flurry of sales for a few days where it spikes up and is on the top 100 lists and stuff. So it's not selling badly at $6.99, and part of that I think is because historical fiction readers are used to seeing so many books from traditional publishers that are priced higher anyway, so $6.99 doesn't seem as absurd as it would seem to like a romance reader. But $4.99 seems to be the right balance point in my genre where you're seeing sustained sales that keep going and don't get too spiky, and also making enough money that it's profitable. So yeah, it's a good one. And I should also point out that I sell the 4-book box set of that series for $9.99, and that is consistently one of my best sellers. I make like 50% of my income off of that one box set. So I don't think people should be afraid to price toward the higher end of the spectrum if they have a larger product like a longer novel or a box set, and if they know, the reader reviews are behind it, and they know that people are going to generally have a good experience from that book.
Okay, have you changed your pricing strategy for the romances you've been doing? What did you price your serials at?
All my romance stuff currently, the serials and the little novellas and the other paranormal romance series, they're all at 99 cents, and that's specifically so that, well, first of all, I'm totally new in that genre. Nobody knows who I am. But more to the point, it's specifically so that I can take advantage of the KU borrow amounts until they finally wise up and decide to to change the structure on that. But as long as they're going to be paying like $1.50 or more, or even close to $1.50 for a borrow, I'm going to stuff all the 99-cent titles I can into KU and just hope it goes crazy. So that was specifically why I got those books rolling when I did, so that I could take whatever advantage I could out of Kindle Unlimited.
Which is very smart. That was one of the things they were talking about down at Indie Recon as well, was that short fiction was doing so well and Kindle Unlimited. Now, have you always been in Select, or did you just sign up for Select specifically to add those books to Kindle Unlimited? Were your Egyptian books in Select?
They're still all, my historical fiction is all still in Select until like I've got like 2 more weeks, first week in November, and then it's all out. I have not been happy with the changes they made to the Kindle Unlimited payouts. I was willing to try it initially, but when it dropped down to 154, I was like, nope. And then it dropped even further, and I was like, no. It's not a good payout on a novel-length book that I know I can sell to a historical fiction audience for $5 to $7. It's just not worth it. But yeah, I specifically stuck those romances in there. I mean, I'm a fast writer, and as soon as I saw the price dropping and dropping on the Kindle payouts, I was like, I just need to crank out as many short little things as I can stuff into KU and build that up while that wave is still rolling. But yeah, I mean, I initially put the Sekhmet Bed, that whole series, into Select right before Kindle Unlimited launched, because I wanted to try a, excuse me, a rolling countdown promotion, which actually went really well. I was very happy with how it turned out, but I was not happy when they announced Kindle Unlimited, and I just became less and less happy with it until I was able to get those 99-cent titles in there, and now I'm feeling much better about it.
Okay, so were you on any of the other platforms before you put your stuff in Kindle Unlimited? Did you pull your books from Barnes & Noble or Apple or anything like that to put them in Unlimited?
Yes, I was everywhere else except for Smashwords. I distribute to Apple, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo via Draft Digital just because I like their service. And then also Scribd and Oyster, or not Oyster, what's, I don't know, whatever, Page Foundry or something. Anywhere else I could be. So yeah, I'm a big believer in wide distribution, unless you have a really darn good reason for narrowing down your distribution. I think Kindle Unlimited is great right now for new authors who are trying to get visibility, because as we noted, there does seem to be a little bit of a boost with borrows, excuse me again, in terms of visibility. But I think once you're more established and people are kind of finding your name on blogs and on Goodreads and word of mouth, it might be a wiser strategy to be as widely distributed as you can so that you're able to pick up sales on these other channels. And especially, I mean, I've noticed a lot of people have remarked on different forums that they saw like their Apple sales or their Google Plus sales or whatever just go crazy right after Kindle Unlimited launched. Yeah, because everyone migrated back over to Select, and suddenly your books are like 500% more visible because there's less competition on these other platforms. So I definitely believe in wide distribution unless you have a darn good reason for going exclusive, such as the fact that you can get $1.50 on a 99-cent title on Kindle Unlimited right now.
Okay, so let's go into the ads a little bit here. You mentioned that you've used BookBub. Everybody agrees that BookBub is pretty much the 100-pound gorilla. Is there any?
Yeah.
Is there any other ads that you found that have been fairly successful or that surprised you at how well they actually turned around and sold your books?
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised by that B Knights guy on Fiverr. I'm sure people have probably talked about him before, and it's B, the letter B, and then Knights as in Knights in Shining Armor. Yeah, he's just this guy who runs a mailing list, and I put just to see what would happen. Out of curiosity, I put my little historical novel, my literary novel, Baptism for the Dead, up for free for a couple of days, and just promoted it on B Nights just to see what would happen. Whatever, throw $5 at it. It took off. It went crazy. I sold like 60, 70 copies of it after it came off free. I gave away like 1,500 free copies during the promo, and that book is still, like 3 months later, is still selling at about 50% more than it typically sells in an average month. So it has had sustained visibility from that promotion, which really surprised me. So B Nights is definitely on my list for guys to try out in the future. I had a good experience with FreeBooksy. I've heard others have not. I'm not sure how much that experience was due to FreeBooksy itself and how much of it was due to other outlets picking up the book and also promoting it. I think it was probably mainly due to FreeBooksy. So that was also a winner for me, and I will try them again to see how they fare. But other than that, it's mainly been BookBub for me. With a series, as I have, I can do a BookBub ad, in October, and I can still see sustained sales from that ad all the way to the end of December if I'm lucky. So it is more expensive, but it also gives me much more ROI over the long term than I've been able to see with any other ads. Oh, and I also liked Fussy Librarian. It was like $8 currently, because I think they're still building their ad for a historical fiction list. And I did really well on there too. I think I got, again, like 1,500 downloads of a free book that I tried on there. So, Fussy Librarian.
Have you tried any of the other promotional ideas that are flying around, like, say, box sets or perma-free? I know that you used to have your first book in the series on perma-free, but you recently took that off. Was there a strategy behind that, or did it not work very well for you?
Perma-free was actually working pretty well. I didn't have any major complaints about it. I mainly just took it off just to compare how it would do with all 4 books in the series at full price. And all the subsequent books in the series, 2, 3, and 4, have continued to sell at pretty much the same rate, whether I have the first book full price or not. So I figured, well, I might as well just leave the first book full price and make a little bit of extra money if I can. But I didn't have any complaints about perma-free. I think it definitely helped increase brand recognition for my books, and I don't know how much it increased sales in the end, but if I were a new author starting out, perma-free would be one of my favorite strategies for sure. I think it's pretty solid in most cases, so it's a good one. I have not done any multi-author box sets yet, just because there aren't any currently that I'm aware of in historical fiction that's not romance. I would like to try it, and I'm actually in the process of kind of arranging some multi-author box sets with some other historical fiction authors, which I'm going to be managing, and see if it increases sales for any of us at all. I'm a big believer in just kind of experimenting and trying a bunch of stuff and throwing the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, and then continuing to throw that strand of spaghetti until it no longer sticks.
What would you say is your most effective marketing? Out of everything that you do, can you point to something and say that that is by far the most effective way for you to move books?
Free book on BookBub. First book in the series free on BookBub has been definitely the biggest one for me. I've seen some really phenomenal ROI on that investment. So if you can get it, I think that's a really good one. Other than that, though, I really think that targeting an underserved niche in historical fiction has served me so well. I don't think I'd be where I am now today if I hadn't just lucked into writing, a book that fit perfectly into this gaping hole in the genre. And I do think that that's the type of thing that a relatively speedy writer can replicate. Historical fiction is still so hungry for so many things that just aren't there yet, that if you can write with speed and if you can write fairly well, you can slide right in there and you can be like the person who rules that niche. So it's good stuff.
And do you have a newsletter?
I do have a newsletter, yeah. I sort of make the promise to my readers that I won't send them frequent updates, that it's always going to be when there's relevant news. So when I have a new book coming out, I just sent one a couple of days ago when we finalized the contract for Tidewater to let them know that that book was going to be republished by Amazon, because that's relevant news. But yeah, I only send out to my newsletter when I have a new release. I don't use it as a sort of constant contact thing, which I know works really well for some authors, but I kind of feel intuitively that historical fiction readers tend to be a little more introverted, a little less likely to enjoy seeing your name pop up in their inbox constantly. So I kind of made that promise from the get-go that I would only use my newsletter when I had a new book out or other extremely relevant news. So I don't see a ton of sales from it, since I'm not kind of using it as a way to sort of pimp my brand all the time. It's really only like on launch days that I use it, but it's effective for that. So yeah.
Do you use any of the free things to try to build your newsletter? Like, a lot of people will give away free novellas or free short stories, or they offer basically their fans a reason to sign up for their newsletters. Do you do anything like that, and is it effective for you?
I love that idea. I haven't tried it yet. I am planning to do it though. I've got a little novella that I'm kind of working on the sidelines right now that's just going to be for subscribers, that's going to follow the story of like a minor character in the She King series, since it's kind of my most popular thing. I figured I could pull this one little character out and sort of just tell her story and give that as my freebie for people as like a thank you for signing up. So I am intending to do it. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. It is a really cool idea. So whoever came up with that one for the first time is genius.
So how about crossover between your fans? Have you gotten much crossover between your historical fiction fans into your romance, or is there no crossover there at all?
It's still so new that I haven't seen a lot of it, but when I announced to my mailing list, just a heads up, like I'm not going to promote my romance to my historical fiction mailing list. They mostly don't want to buy that anyway. But I just gave them a heads up, like, hey, you guys might be interested that I also have launched this other pen name. You might want to check it out. I got a lot of readers who emailed me directly off of that mailer and said, oh, I'm so excited. I'm so glad to see that you're writing romance because I love it. So I was like, okay, cool. So I have had some crossover, even though I'm still pretty new at the romance thing. For me, the big surprise has been how many people have crossed over from historical fiction to literary fiction who have tried my like contemporary literary stuff. That's just kind of, I always think of that as being sort of outside the realm of what most historical fiction readers want to read, especially if they're really into like ancient civilizations, like I tend to focus on. But I've been really surprised by how many people follow. They'll get all the way through the She King series and then they'll click on, in the back matter, Baptism for the Dead, and go buy that book and read it too. Surprising. And I track who buys what out of my back matter with Amazon affiliate links, so I always have a good idea of what's selling and from where.
Have you tried to do any kind of cross promo between your different names or your different genres? Like if you put, like, say in the back of your historical fiction a little blurb or anything for the romance, have you tried to kind of promote crossover between the two audiences?
Yes, I do put in my back matter, there's a little note that's like, hey, did you know I also write paranormal romance under this pen name? You can check it out here, just in case they want to check it out. It's a sort of an unobtrusive way. It's there in the back matter, so they'll probably see it if they're going to be perusing the back matter anyway, looking for more books. But it's not like hitting them over the head with it. It's just kind of giving them the option to sort of check it out. So I'm still new enough at romance that I don't know how well that's working, but it seems logical to me to, if you're going to stick stuff in back matter anyway, you might as well just try to, hit those few readers who are going to be interested in romance along with your other stuff too.
Well, I will say there will be a lot more romance authors for you to kind of hook up with and do some author promotions with. Now, are you very active on social media trying to get your name out there? Do you spend a lot of time on Twitter or Facebook, or how do you kind of handle the balance between the social media and your writing and, marketing?
This is another question I'm kind of ashamed to answer because it's so terrible. Like, I'm so bad at social media, and a lot of it is just, it's just relearning a habit that I sort of talked myself out of, because while I was still working at day jobs, I really worked hard to convince myself that everything in the world was incredibly boring except for writing new books, and I was maybe a little bit too successful at that. So I really have kind of neglected social media for years, and I don't really know what to do with it anymore because I spent all my free time writing. And now I have, a little more free time that I should be spending on more effective promotion, and I'm not. I have gotten more active on Facebook recently, and I'm using that mainly to network with other authors in my genre, which I figure, if I start making friends with these other authors, not only are they fun to talk to and they all have great ideas about how to promote books and what's coming down the line for our genre, but also some of their readers are probably seeing my name pop up in their Facebook feed too, which is not my primary motivation for doing it. They're genuinely cool people who I want to get to know, but it definitely is having maybe a passive effect of kind of getting my name out to some of their readers as well, and kind of just spreading my name a little bit. But I'm so bad at social media. I really am. It's awful.
So you signed with Amazon, is that correct? You signed Tidewater with Amazon. Which imprint did you end up signing with?
Yes, it is Lake Union, which is their historical and literary fiction imprint, and they also do, I think, memoir under that one as well. So yeah, the big surprise for me was that they had seen it at all. I didn't approach them about it. I self-published Tidewater like in the middle of July. In fact, it was on the same day that Kindle Unlimited launched, so everyone ignored Tidewater and like jumped on Kindle Unlimited, which is my luck. So the launch was not great. It kind of flopped, and it was just like reviews were very slowly trickling in, and sales were not what I was hoping they would be, and I was kind of like, meh. But yeah, back in early September, I got an email from somebody at Lake Union who had read it and really liked it and wanted to talk to me about whether I'd be interested in working with them. So I did talk to them for quite a while and talked to some other authors as well who have worked with Amazon imprints and really gathered a lot of information, and I finally decided that I thought it was going to be a very good move for me career-wise. And since I write so fast, it really couldn't hurt, and it might help. So I went ahead and signed the book up.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that question why you would sign a book with one of the Amazon imprints when the book's selling fairly well on its own. Could you kind of give a little bit of a reason what made you kind of decide to go with Amazon? Was there a strategy kind of behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never been my goal to get like the letters on my name. If I ever end up as a USA Today bestseller or a New York Times bestseller, that's cool. I'll certainly take it, but it's never been like my career goal to get that feather in my cap. But what I have always really wanted to do is be acknowledged as like one of the top voices in whatever genre I'm writing in. I would just like to be one of those people who's like, oh yeah, Libbie Hawker, she's the historical fiction chick, So I have been watching what Lake Union does for a long time, how well they promote books and how they're packaging and promoting historical fiction. I'd had my eye on the press for quite some time, but I don't have an agent and don't really have a desire to work with one, so I was kind of like, well, they're never going to be interested in me, and I can't query them without an agent, so whatever, it's a pipe dream. But yeah, I mean, it was a natural choice for me because I have been paying such close attention to which authors are selling what in my genre and who is publishing those books, whether they're self-published or whether a different publisher is backing them. And in most cases, the books that are selling the best in historical fiction are backed by Lake Union. So it was very exciting for me to get approached by them, and it was, I wouldn't say it was a no-brainer to go with it. I agonized over it quite a lot because it is a big decision to sign over, your rights to a book to someone else and to sort of put your trust in them. But I spoke to a lot of other authors who had worked with various Amazon imprints, including Trish, and made sure that their experiences were in line with what I felt I could live with. Like, obviously, there are non-disclosure agreements in book contracts, so you can't. I wasn't necessarily, learning all the details of what their experiences were like. But in general terms, I spoke to them about whether they were happy with it, whether it's something they would do again, and everybody had nothing but positive things to say about Amazon publishing. A lot of authors who had worked with other publishers too had told me, if this was any other publisher, I would not be advising you to take this deal. So I think that speaks volumes. And then, again, I can't obviously say much about the contract, but when it did get to the phase where we started negotiating the contract, I was very pleasantly surprised at what a nice contract it was. Like, I'm not talking in terms of money or anything like that. I'm just talking in terms of how straightforward and clear and not torture it was to look at. Like, I didn't have one moment looking over that contract where I was like, oh God, what have I gotten myself into? So it was good.
Yeah, the guy from Passive Voice, the Passive Voice blog, the contract attorney there, did my contract for me. I think his name's David Vandengrath, if I remember right.
Yeah, Vandengrath.
Right. He told me at the time that the Amazon contracts were the fairest contracts he's seen. The fairest by far of any of the publishing houses. They were by far the fairest. So yeah. I do think that they try to be honestly fair to their authors. So there's never a worry for me on that. We're kind of a little bit past the hour now, so I will hand it over to Adam for our closing remarks. And it was really nice chatting with you, Libbie.
You too. Thank you.
All right, and so I know it's after the hour just a little bit. We have some other questions that kind of came throughout the show. Do you have an extra 5 to 10 minutes to hit those before you're gone?
Oh, sure, yeah.
All right, cool. Let me pull them up here. While I'm doing that, I wanted to mention, you said that you're one of those authors that are kind of try everything, throw the spaghetti at the wall sort of thing, and I've noticed from listening to the shows and then even our last couple of interviews, that it seems like a lot of the most successful authors have that same outlook, like just keep doing everything until something works, and then when it does work, stick there. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. I mean, the way I look at it is this industry is changing so fast anyway. You never know what's coming down the line next. So you might as well just go crazy, try things that seem absurd, or try things that no one else is trying, or try things that used to work 3 years ago but aren't working now. They might work again. So, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so I got the questions brought up now. The first question on the list is from Kate Morgan from the website, and she wants to know a little bit about reviews. In the beginning, when you only had 1 or 2 books out, what did you do to start getting reviews? Is it easier now that you have an audience, and do you utilize ARCs to get reviews at all?
Oh, good question. I tried utilizing ARCs with Tidewater's release, which was an interesting process. I used NetGalley for that. It was fun and interesting and exciting to see people reacting to my book, and probably mainly just to its cover, because it was a pretty great cover. In this flurry of excitement. I didn't note that a whole lot of reviews resulted from it afterwards. But when I first released The Sekhmet Bed, which was my very first book, like I said, I priced it just a little bit higher than average, and that was specifically because I wanted to give it good reviews from the beginning if I could, to try to give it the best advantage I could. And my reasoning behind that was, by scaring away everybody who was just looking for a cheap read, I would attract only buyers who really wanted to read that book specifically, and would be likely to be very, very satisfied and happy with it, and likely to leave a really awesome glowing review. And it did work pretty well. So it's not necessarily a strategy that every author is going to feel comfortable with, kind of pricing yourself out of the range just a little bit. It is a little bit risky. You're not going to get as many sales at first. But if your concern is more to start out with really strong reviews than to start out with strong sales, I think it's a really great way to do it.
Right, and so now that you kind of have a fan base, do you find it much easier to get reviews? Do you pretty much have a loyal fan base that comes in every time there's a new release and leaves you some of those reviews to get you started? Or?
Oh yeah, I've done some fun stuff with the books in the series in the past, where every time I put a new book out, I told my mailing list, first 10 people who review this book are going to get a free copy of the next book. So I did have people who read it and reviewed it very quickly, and they were leaving honest reviews. You could tell they'd read the entire book. They weren't just like, this book was great, 5 stars, where's my free book, Libbie? So I did have dedicated fans who were willing to read through the book pretty fast and leave a nice review of it from that point. So that has been helpful. Tidewater's reviews are coming in more slowly because it's not a part of a series, and it's a little bit different from my Egyptian stuff. But the reviews are still pretty strong. I mean, I think I'm up to 45, and the book's been out since mid-July, so that's not too bad for where it is now.
Yep, sure. That's an interesting tactic. I haven't seen that before, where it's you reward the first people to go review. So maybe I have to try that. So
yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. The next question. Let's see here. Do you think it's important in historical fiction to have a series, or are standalones more prominent in that genre? The wisdom right now is that no matter what you do, make sure it's a series. Do you think that holds true in historical fiction, or?
I think it does to a large degree, which is kind of surprising, because it is the type of genre where fans are okay with standalone books. Traditionally, they really only read standalones, and series are mostly a newer thing that's really only starting to come out in the last few years as indie publishing kind of ramps up. But yeah, I have seen very strong response to my series, and other authors who are doing historical fiction in a series are also seeing a really, really good response to that as well. So my instinct at this point says that yes, a series is still a winning strategy, even in historical fiction. I don't think you're going to suffer if you don't have a series in historical fiction. I think you can still find your readers. But the benefits to having a series are so great that you can, the promotional stuff you can do with it is fantastic. And like I said, my biggest earner, 50% of my income comes from sales of the 4-book set of my series. So it's a big chunk of money, and it would kind of suck to not have that coming in. I want to be writing kind of standalone stuff in the near future. I like standalones. It's, you know, the traditional historical fiction thing. What I've decided to do is to kind of link the standalones I'm going to be writing together with like a related theme. So they're all going to be basically stories about real women from ancient history. So each book is totally standalone, but they all have this common theme, so I can still sell it as a series. And the benefit to something like that, where you actually have standalone books within one series, is that you can promote any of those books, and they'll all lead to sales of the other books within the series. So you could do like a BookBub ad once a month with each of those books, and just watch crazy sales happen out of that. So, yes, series.
Yeah, that's smart too, and I think I've seen several people like on Kindle boards and things, romance authors do things where they'll do that, a lot of standalones, but they'll put it all in the same town and things like that. You can go link it together.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm glad to see it works with seemingly every genre so far. So we have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Being mainly, let's see, trying to decipher this question. Writing historical fiction, have you done anything like talks at schools, anything like that?
I haven't yet. I would like to, but the opportunity hasn't really presented itself so far. I did apply for, I pitched like 3 or 4 different panel discussion ideas for the Historical Novel Society Conference, which is in Denver next summer. And we're supposed to be finding out which people are going to be appointed as the speakers in about a week here. So I don't know if I'll be one of them yet, but I had some pretty cool pitches, so I got my fingers crossed. We'll see.
All right, good luck with that too. And do you think the being hooked in with the Amazon imprint is going to help you there as well now, or?
It certainly might. I mean, that's one of the things that I was eager to sign with an Amazon imprint for, was to see whether it will open up more promotional opportunities for me and give me kind of the chance to expose my entire brand, not just the stuff that's with Amazon, but the stuff that I self-publish as well, to a wider audience. So I'm hoping for it. That's kind of that's part of the gamble I took with signing my book over to them, is that it'll kind of raise all of my opportunities a little bit.
Right, and I'll try to get through the last couple pretty quickly. There's a few that we can kind of lump together.
Okay.
One being that with historical fiction, traditionally, well, of course, everything traditionally was paperback, but with historical fiction, it's still a really big paperback predominant market, it seems. How are your paperback sales?
My paperback sales are minuscule. I do like 98% ebook and the rest paperback. It's part of that is because I have seen my sales being so slow with paperback that I've really only bothered to do 2 books so far in paperback. Like, it's on my to-do list to get more of them out this winter, but the sales are so small that it's not worth it to me to put the time into it right now. So ebook for me is totally where it's at. And audiobook, my audiobooks do pretty well too.
Yeah, and that was actually the next question I was going to lump in. So I noticed that your books were on audio also. Do you have them all on audio right now, and how are they doing?
The first 2 in the series are on audio. The other 2 I am working on getting the production all financed for that. My narrator's really, really great, but she's also kind of pricey, which I don't begrudge her at all. So I am kind of holding out for my advance to come from Amazon so I can pay for the other 2 audiobooks to get made. So, yep.
All right. So you do think it's worth it, though, for people in the historical fiction market to go with audio, but maybe even do that before paperback, it sounds?
Absolutely. It's historical fiction readers love audiobooks, especially if you have a long book, the longer the better. Historical fiction tends to do very, very well in audiobook, and it always has, even like way back in traditional publishing only days. It's always been a very strong genre in the audio market. So yeah, very smart to get into there.
And let's see, next on here. You talked about this a little bit earlier. I know you have the nonfiction book regarding writing, the writing side of things. Have you thought of doing any nonfiction books about history?
The answer to that is a resounding no. Not because I wouldn't like to write it, I would, but because I technically don't even have a high school diploma, so nobody would believe a word I say, and that's probably smart of them, so I'm sticking to fiction where it doesn't matter what my educational past is like.
And I think just one last one. You mentioned that you weren't getting very good returns for your borrows now that KU rate is going down and your book's being priced on the higher end. You know, when they borrow it instead of buy it, you're actually losing quite a bit. So when your current term in Select is over, are you going to pull those and go wide again, or?
Yep, I'm going wide again. I'm going everywhere. Strategically, I'm going to Google Plus because I've heard that it is really picking up sales a lot as people are migrating back over to do Select. So, yep, I'm going everywhere with the historical fiction. It's going to be all over the place. Looking forward to it. Obviously, when Tidewater comes back out, its distribution will be dependent on wherever Amazon is able to distribute it. So, yeah. Yeah,
and I agree with Google Play. That's one of the things that's making it a really hard decision for us to try Kindle Unlimited or not. Since Kindle Unlimited started, Google Play has been the one that exploded the most for us, and this current month actually is already double, with no new releases, double of what we have ever made on Google Play. So I definitely recommend going with Google Play if you're not in. I know a lot of people don't do it because it's a little cumbersome and you have to figure out the price matching stuff, but you know, put in that little bit of time the first time, it is completely worth it. I don't regret it at all.
Yep, it's a very strong market, and I think if anything has the capacity to really compete strongly with Amazon, it's going to be Google. So.
For sure. All right, that was all the questions I have. Just to refresh, doesn't look like anything new came in. Before we wrap up, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you and where they can find your books?
Sure, you can find my historical and literary fiction at libbiehawker.com, and my name is spelled with an I-E, not with a Y, so Libbie with an I-E. And if you are curious about my brand new paranormal romance, that is at libstarling.com.
All right, perfect. So thanks for coming on and talking to us tonight. You know, I'm a fan of history as well, so I thought it was real interesting. Hopefully everyone else did as well. I'm sure they did. Before we wrap up the show, I want to say that there is not going to be an after party tonight. I'm unable to do one. We have a book release launching tonight at midnight, and then tomorrow is my daughter's birthday, so I am all wrapped up. And Lindsay is in a hotel somewhere in Chicago, and then, of course, Trish is busy tonight as well. So, but I did want to say that there's a couple things that we're doing here soon to improve some parts of the show. I noticed that some of the links to the show were very long, so we're going to be reducing those a little bit. It'll be a quick process though, so you should be able to just type our website name, selfpublishingroundtable.com/ and then a show number, and go to that show. So that'll be up probably in about a week. Also, I know some people were saying that the shows weren't up on iTunes yet. We're still working on the kinks of that since the show went to the new process, so we hope to start getting those up the day after the show. I don't have an ETA of when we're going to start doing that, but just to let everyone know, we are working on that. And speaking of iTunes, if you haven't already, as authors, you definitely know how important reviews are. Go on iTunes and leave us a review if you would. Honest review. It helps out a lot. It helps out with visibility, just like it does with authors. In that same respect, be sure you're following us on Twitter as well at SP Roundtable, and like us on Facebook as well. And that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining us, Libbie. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.